So thanks for the kind introduction. So maybe just a side note to it. It's true, I had the pleasure many years back to study in India. Long story how I got there. The reality is I went to India to study, not knowing what to expect, and I decided to leave India very fast because I thought these people work too hard, are too brilliant and too competitive. I need to go back to Europe. So on that note, what I would like to do is, I will give you a little bit of a perspective on the SAP's view of the world, and many of the examples I will give, Raja was kind enough to share the same, so I will make it a little bit short, but good to see we see some of the same trends. I will probably digest a little bit more on how SAP would like to see it play its role in enabling your organization to drive your respective digital transformations. And if time permits, I'm happy to take any questions later on as well. Do I have the... Thank you very much. So, in terms of the digital transformation, I think the example about the Airbnb was raised before. It's an amazing example. Just to caveat what Raja said, I'm not sure if you remember a few years back, the Pope was going to visit the US for the first time in one of the states. And the biggest problems they had 1 million people coming in, and they basically only had 200,000 hotel rooms. And what they did was they approached Airbnb, and all in a sudden they had 5 times more hotel rooms available. There's just a fantastic way that you can redesign your business model. And what SAP operates with is basically this terminology and how you can reimagine your business. There's basically no limitation today to how your business can look like. It's up to you to define how the business can be driven. It's up to you to define how you can use IT in order to enable whatever business model you would like to embrace on. Another example I think is always interesting to refer to is back in the 2000s, if you want to start an IT company, in the US, they would refer to that would cost at least good 5 million in order to set it up. Nowadays, I would argue to say you can even do it for much less than 5,000. We can start you can open up an account fairly easily for a couple of hundred US dollars nowadays, and then you're basically up and running and having a business which is effective. I think a few examples I will allude to, and again to complement what Raja said, take a small moment and think about self-driving cars. So, when was the car invented? Around the 1800s or thereabout, right? Back then, a car consisted of basically 4 wheels, an engine, and steering wheel, etc. By and large, it's the same today. So for many, many years, that industry itself, that product itself, haven't innovated a whole lot. Small little refinement, but not a evolution, I would argue it was. That is going to massively change right now. And the way it's going to change is because IT plays a significant role when it comes to car. We can basically, right now, you can, for approximately around 8,000 to 10,000 extra, you can make your car a self-driven car. So the technology, the sensors, radar, etc. you need to put into your car cost approximately that. And that price obviously is going dramatically down with a very, very fast pace. Resulting is that we will eventually have a significant amount of self-driven car, particularly in some of the more emerging or mature economy like the US, parts of Europe, etc. You'll probably also see in the years to come that the price of the car, that the bigger chunk of that price of the car, or the production of it, would be for the software itself. Because it will be software which basically drives the car, manages the car, steers the car, etc. So this is basically an example of an industry which has gone through multiple small evolutions. I wouldn't say that it's major revolution over the last couple of decades, but we are just at a junction point right now that I'm pretty sure within the next 10, 15, 20 years, we will see a massive shift. I'm sure many of you are smiling and say, okay, self-driven cars in India. That will be an interesting pilot to run. I'm sure the software will be a unique one to make that work. It also comes down to, when you look at the self-driven car, that cars is so much embedded in our daily life. The way we drive, the behavior we have on the roads, where we go, we have basically our GPS map coded in our brain. And just imagine if you have a self-driven car, how it just changed the whole experience. You no longer have to shift the gears, you no longer have to think about how to steer the car, you no longer have to think about where to go, etc. So it basically redefines entirely the whole fact of transporting yourself in a vehicle. Again, a testament to the fact IT plays a major role in driving this digital transformation within the car industries. Another example I can allude to is drones. I'm actually not aware. Drones are allowed in India, right? In certain areas. Okay, yeah. There's large parts of, obviously, Europe, where I'm from, that's becoming a huge problem because everyone flies around with them randomly. So drones right now, basically they are at a stage, they go anywhere. They are quite cheap. There's a lot of people who buy them and use them just for the fun of it, but obviously you can use them for professional use as well, etc. You see, the reason for the whole drones becoming something that is commoditized right now is that the cost of the GPS has gone dramatically down over the last couple of years. You see that the drones have become more and more effective. They can actually start to lift cargoes. You start to see that drones can actually be used as a means to transport goods into rural areas where you don't have the infrastructure, etc. So something which started out being, if I'm not mistaken, drones was something which was introduced first in the First World War by some military, and obviously with the purpose to do surveillance and other things, now actually has a totally different purpose. You can start to make an impact in areas where there's disasters. You can start to make an impact in rural areas where you can't get food out, etc. You all already see now that drones are becoming extremely effectively used in some industries. Agriculture is one area, particularly in the US, Canada, parts of Latin America. Drones are used effectively to basically supervise your agriculture. Emergency response to fires, etc. And I can go on and on and on. The fact of the matter is there was a technology which has evolved. We have injected some software into it, and now it starts to be used as a very effective means to address specific business and people needs. The third example I will bring out is around manufacturing. So we have gone through various industrial revolutions. We have gone through various revolutions where it was all about standardization, making sure that the products became as consistent as possible so you could do mass production. I would arguably say that is going to massively change. How? We're probably going to see that every individual on this planet can be their own little manufacturer. We have today 3D printing. We have the opportunity today that every individual in this room can buy a 3D printer, go home, you can design your own product, you can actually produce your own product, and you can then ship it, use it, whatever platform, Alibaba or any other platform you want to use to sell it. But it means effectively it changed significantly from the waves that we have had the last couple of decades where everything became more and more standardized. You basically see that more and more products become individualized, either produced, designed by individual, or for that matter, you'll see a couple of examples, and I will introduce it later, where a lot of companies have started to introduce opportunities for their consumers to individualize the products. The result being is we can actually move the production closer to the area where the needs are of the consumers. You mentioned the example before, Roger, with transportation in India, how long time it takes. Imagine with the whole revolution around 3D printing, you can actually start to produce things more and more in the areas where the need of and the dependency of transportation will change quite dramatically. So there are some people who will state that basically products in the past are designed for manufacturers to make a production, and that will change increasingly to basically they're designed for individuals. The 3 examples, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Coca-Cola have introduced this machine where you basically can design your own flavors. Have you heard of it? It's basically you could take a standard Coke and then you can decide what kind of flavor you want, cherry or whatever, raspberry, and you can add it to your own Coke, so you can customize your own Coke. Nike have made this concept of Nike, which means that you can design your own little labels that you can put on your Nike shoes. So you can go into a website, or there are special stores for it as well. I like a star on my Nike shoes, and then you can design it, and then we'll produce it uniquely for that shoe and ship it to you. So basically, after going through a wave of a lot of standardization in order to scale, it becomes more and more customized, individualized product. Again, technology is the backbone in order to drive that change. The last example I want to highlight is in terms of machines and people. So we have a scenario right now that we have robots, and many of you use robots in your businesses, in your manufacturing, if you're a manufacturer, etc., to perform most often a very uniform task. With the advancement of the robots we have today, you can see it's more and more sophisticated tasks that robots can pick up. You'll even see in some cases that the robots becomes more and more humanized. They can start to have voice recognition. There's even some robots, but people argue to say that these robots have a better voice recognition than a human being. I'm not sure that's entirely true yet, but that's the trend it's going towards. That will obviously lead towards that we will have more and more robots taking over tasks which today are performed by humans, in the cases where it makes economically sense. You see basically as the price of the production of these robots, more and more robots will be introduced in your production floor, etc., and the various activities you perform in your business. You see with the whole wave of Internet of Things, putting in more sensors, floating more data, using data effectively, etc., you can start to use machines in a different fashion than what we have experienced in the past. Net, there's some people who would say that all these imaginary movies we sometimes see from Hollywood, I guess from Bollywood as well, Iron Man, I'm sure you are familiar with the concept. The reality is right now the US is actually working on an Iron Man suit for the military in the US. So the future is not that distant, it's actually quite close, and I would arguably say the waves we go through in order to get there get shorter and shorter all the time. Last but not least, and Raja alluded to it as well, the way we heal people. I would arguably say the way the whole healthcare sector works today, they look towards treating people, detect an illness and then treat it. But they don't work towards to actually identify the illness and proactively prevent that the illness comes through. One of the reasons for that is just the whole complexity around it. We haven't had the data, we haven't been able to structure the data, use the data effectively, to be able to detect proactively the whatever symptoms an individual may have and treat it proactively. Example being, today you can very easily track and monitor the behavior of an individual, eating habits, I'm sure many of you have these Fitbit watches or whatever they're called, which keeps on counting that you are not doing enough workouts. So it's if you want to have more bad guilt about yourself, you can always invest in these kind of devices. But all these devices actually help to collect more data and can be used to identify whether you have the risk of potentially be sick. And you can treat things proactively. Result being the whole healthcare industry will be probably one of the industries which will go through one of the biggest revolution ever in terms of how they use IT and how they operate. I think there's a few things worth noting in that context. One is that we obviously as human beings needs to embrace these changes. I think and there was a question earlier in terms of how you drive adoption of these new technologies. I actually would arguably say that the constraints is not technology anymore, it's human beings. It's because it's so ingrained in our brain, the way we operate, the way we think, the way we act, that for us it's sometimes too disruptive in the way that technology can help us. So we need to trust technology more. In the case of example with healthcare, you need to trust the technology and the data can tell you better what you need as opposed to what you potentially have used as source as truth in the past. So that brings me a little bit to where SAP plays a role in this, and let me spend a little bit more time on it. And again, as I said, I'm happy to take questions in the end if this it doesn't come across loud and clear to everyone. So SAP India have been in the India market for 20 years. It's actually a 20-year celebration. So we have been here for a while. We have worked with many of the enterprises in this room for many of those 20 years. And we obviously have intent around staying around for a whole lot longer and continue to help your enterprises become more digital. There's a few things that we particularly focus on when we have discussion around how we can help our customer, in this case help you guys as well. It's basically questions around how can you utilize your assets better. Many of you operate within industry which are very asset rich. How can you make sure to utilize those assets effectively to become more cost effective? We have a lot of discussions with our customers around how can they engage better with their customer, or for that matter, work better with their customer and their customer. So go through the entire supply chain, establishing an omni-channel framework, so making sure that you have insights, intelligence throughout the entire value chain, and you can make informed decisions. We have a lot of discussions around how can we digitalize the core of the business. So many of you have already made an investment in SAP, and to the remark made earlier, when you pay something for a product or for a service, you are becoming more demanding. I can say that's definitely the truth for SAP. Our customers are quite demanding once they have paid for an SAP solution. So we have a lot of discussions around how can we make those processes more effective and digitize the core. The whole notion around the workforce, I think that has gone through a fair bit of change, the way we engage with our customer. Most of our conversation right now happen with the head of HR and no longer with the IT department. A lot of conversation goes around how you manage your workforce more effectively. Your contingent workforce, how you make sure that you drive effective outcome of your workforce, that you have you lower your retention rate, you drive towards a higher productivity. And last but not least, how you can continue to establish a better and more effective collaboration with your suppliers. So all this translates to a very simple view of our strategy. And many of you have maybe seen this slide before in one shape or another. But let me try to elaborate it with my word, and hopefully that resonates with what you have heard before. The way that SAP defines its strategy right now is we have effectively a digital core. Our digital core is effectively what you have known in the past as ECC, or R3, or whatever solution or version you're currently on. That is what we call S/4HANA right now. S stands for simple. So it's basically, we want to run simple. We have this solution we call S/4HANA, and it's basically the core of our solution. It's the backbone of it. When we refer to simple, what that means is we have basically gone back to all the coding we have done in our ECC solution, and we have recoded it with 3 objectives. One is we want to make the data models more simple. We want to make sure that with leveraging our HANA database, we get to a situation that we can structure a data which sits in a structured, unstructured format, even text, in a fashion that you can easily run reports and you can run your business in real time. The second part of it is we have gone through an entire revolution, I would argue, where the way we set up our user interface. Many of you have been in the IT world for many, many years and decades even, and I'm sure you will agree with me, SAP screens are not the most sexy one in the world. We have heard your feedback. I'm not saying they're sexy now, but they're definitely a little bit more user-friendly. So we have made the whole user interface much more simple, and we also made the opportunity for you to basically design your user interface in a shape or fashion that is relevant to the role of your business users. Last but not least, the whole process structure of our solution, we have simplified the process flow to make sure we reduce the steps you have to go through to go through a certain transaction. So again, we have a digital core which has been redesigned with the notion of simplicity, simple data model, simple user interface, and last but not least, simple processes. That is the core. What I do want to highlight to you is all SAP's investment goes into that digital core right now. So the vast majority of everything we do right now from a development perspective relates to how we evolve this S/4HANA core. So many of you have either taken the S4 journey already, some of you are planning to, some of you are maybe not there yet, but I would urge you familiarize yourself with the whole notion of S4, because the vast majority of our innovation will come from that digital core. Surrounded with that digital core, we have the whole workforce engagement. We have some new solutions, particularly in the cloud space that we have acquired recently, which is SuccessFactors. And basically that gives an opportunity to manage your workforce in a way that we haven't been able to before. Particularly around talent management is one of the areas that we have made significant investment in. We have a business network procurement solution which we call called Ariba, and basically that enables you to operate on a business platform at a scale that we have never seen before. We have the whole customer omnichannel experience fueled with our hybrid solution that enables you to engage with your customer in a seamless way and get information that you can react on in a seamless manner. And last but not least, to the example earlier around managing your assets, the Internet of Things is absolutely something which is front and center in SAP's product strategy, fueled with what we call our HANA Cloud Platform. So, again, maybe this is well known to some of you it might be new, but I think it's worthwhile just to digest that the way that SAP was perceived and the way that we designed our product just 10 years back, we were fundamentally a core ERP company. We are not that anymore. Actually, half of the business that SAP has is about ERP core. The other half is around platform solution, analytic solution, and you name it. So we are not the company we were in the past, but I will arguably say we are still not the company we want to be. We are fundamentally a different company we were just 6 years back. Some examples in this context, and you can see some of the solutions that are referred to before. I think it's it's always interesting to observe around this whole business networking notion I mentioned around our Ariba solution. It's actually around 850 billion transaction which goes through the SAP network on a daily basis. It's a huge platform that we have established with multiple suppliers. You'll see that with the pillars that we have right now, we basically have an opportunity to engage with your customers and your suppliers in a more effective way. So, how does that translate to India? Just to give you a few examples, because I think we are well ahead in India in terms of just establish ourselves as part of the digital India, and to Raja's earlier comment around Moody's a view around how IT can be used to drive more fortune within India. You may not be aware of it, but the vast majority of tickets in the railway, when you buy a railway ticket, it has touched one way or another an SAP solution. You may not be aware of it, but all airports in India are operating fully or partially on an SAP solution. So when you go through an airport, you basically touch an SAP solution as well. A lot of the products that you get shipped from abroad goes to a port in India, which basically all the ports in India have partially SAP solutions embedded as well. So my point is, SAP is playing a different role than what we had in the past. We have a different product strategy. We have the ability to play a much more strategic role in driving your digital transformation. The good thing is we have the product now, which I would arguably say we did not have just 10, 15 years back. We have already started with multiple customers, both in India and outside of India, to engage in strategic conversation around how can we enable that digital transformation journey that was spoken about before. And I think we have some brilliant examples in India on how we basically become an integral part of the society and how we are part of changing people's life. Because in the end of the day, our aspirations is, to your comment earlier, we want to touch 1 billion people's life. 1 billion people's life in India. And I think we are well ahead in that curve, and we have the opportunity to continue it. And obviously, I would hope that we have the opportunity to work with your respective organizations to see how SAP can help you to become a more digital company. So with that, I will pause and then ask if there's any questions from anyone on the...
Do you ever wondered about SAP? So I actually have a question. If someone were to ask you for advice, the 3 top things that a CIO should be currently looking at, what would they be?
So your question is 3 top things a CIO should be looking for right now?
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So my view in terms of, if I was in the shoes of a CIO, and probably that's in the context of the conversation I primarily have with the CIOs, both in India, but in my previous roles outside India as well. First and foremost, how can I remain relevant? So IT organizations are playing a massively different role today than it did in the past. Some organizations use the IT arm to basically to be a support function, to fix some printer, etc. Some IT organizations have evolved in to become a strategic partner. I actually believe that if you want to remain relevant, you need to be a critical business function. With what we have available within software IT today, you can play the role as a critical business function. Who says that IT can't come up with suggestions to new business model? You guys, given your background, if you're an IT function, know what IT can do. You're probably in the best position to suggest to your stakeholder in the business how you can leverage IT to reimagine or redesign the business models. So, number one would be, how can you remain relevant to your organization so you basically continue to add value. The second thing I would focus on if I was a CIO was, how can I basically make sure that I use my spending wisely? So a lot of our customers have invested heavily over the last couple of years in hardware, in software, in people, etc. We are going through major disruptions right now, move to clouds, etc. And the opportunities and the options you have available is massively different than what you had in your past. The worst thing you can do is to sit back and try to protect the past. If I was you, I would sit and challenge every single investment you have. Why would I have data? Why would I have servers? Why wouldn't I go to a data center? Why wouldn't I go to a cloud solution? Why would I have 2,000 people sitting in my IT department where I potentially could outsource parts of it to a partner, and then I can focus on some key activities, key processes, etc. So basically, I would urge you, sit and look wisely in terms of where your spending sits, and don't be protective around the past. It will prevent you from scale in the future. And the last thing I would highlight if I was a CIO was basically come up with a framework in whatever context you're working, where you basically set a framework where you can stabilize the core. You can stabilize and you can scale the core. And in the area where your business and your process differentiate yourself from your competitor, that's where you need to be agile. That's where you need to be flexible. In the end of the day, you all live in a very competitive world. And you don't want to be like the one next door. But as an example, writing an invoice, why sitting and spending a lot of money to have a very, very unique invoicing process? Because it is quite standard process. So basically establish a very stable core where you run the process, where you can't differentiate, and make sure you become agile and flexible in the areas where you can differentiate yourself. So those will be the three things that I would highlight.
Great. We do have a question at the back. If you could introduce yourself.
I'm Anshuman Datta from Shyam Group.
Yep.
My question is very specific to HANA.
Yep.
Whenever we have upgrade of any software in other than SAP, the migration or the transformation process from the previous one to the next one is expected to be quite smooth. Whereas when you look at a critical application like SAP EHP7 and you plan to move on to HANA, the path that is suggested by SAP, is not very easy. It's time taken, and the final cutover, I mean when you want to shift the day, you need to completely stop your operations for a couple of days. That's what's generally being advised by the consulting partners. I don't know what is the fact actually, but one has to appreciate when you go to a product like SAP and you are a company which is 24/7, you cannot have 2 days. You cannot stop your business for 2 days. So as a user, I would request SAP to look into this particular matter, because many of us who would like to go to HANA are not able to take a decision because of this.
I think it's an extremely good question. I'm glad to take my view on it. There's a few things. You've probably been around in the IT industry for a while, so you remember when we moved from R3 to ECC, right? That was a quite disruptive move as well, and the migration path between the two was quite complex as well. It was not just from one day to another you move. I think what we did very well back then in SAP, we structured a very, very comprehensive migration path for our customer, how to move from R3 to ECC in that specific case. And what we did very well as well was to educate our partners and the ecosystem on how to advise our customer on making that journey, because it was a quite disruptive journey. The reason why it was because it was a fundamental redesign of the architecture. It was not the small little modification changing the color from blue to red. So what we are going through right now, if you want to transition from ECC to S/4HANA as a case of example, as I mentioned before, it is a fundamental redesign of the core. So it is not easy, and I will never ever state that it should be easy or it can be easy. What we have done, and we have more work to be done, I will be honest on that, we have again laid out a migration roadmap. And depending on the situation you are in, we can advise you on terms of how to drive that migration path and transition into S/4HANA. In some organizations, that's a longer journey. In some organizations, it's a shorter one. It very much comes down to how much are you aligned to the best practices. If you've gone through decades of customization and you expect to take that customization and bring that into S4, I will be the first one to tell you it will be a complicated exercise. I will probably even recommend you, why not take this as an opportunity to do a redeployment to get back to best practices. The other part that we need to continue to do better of is work with our partner to make sure that we join forces around this. Because in the end of the day, it is my interest, and hopefully our partner's interest as well, that it becomes a smooth journey for you so you can continue on your innovation journey. And sometimes I think we miss the opportunity in SAP to educate the partners around it, and we manage one way or another to complicate something which could have been done a little bit easier. So without knowing your specific case, I'm more than happy to understand what you have been recommended, and with the help of my colleagues, we can tell you if we see it in a different path.
No, my question was not about the path.
Okay?
The path you take to change your customization or whatever specifics you have into another platform, say S/4HANA, that's fine. I'm saying the final cutover. I mean, the day you decide, okay, I switch off today and I switch on, the kind of correction measures, checks you have to do, it calls for a complete halt of your operation for a day or so. That's what being recommended. I'm not saying that may be the case, but that's what is recommended. But just because SAP runs a lot of business over the world, only my suggestion is there can be a case where you cannot stop your operations for 24 hours.
I fully agree with you. And again, I don't know your specific case. I'm not sure who advised you. What I would definitely like to is to get your card, and then let's look into if there's something we can do to make that shorter. I can assure you, we share the same view. You cannot have a close down on your business for days, whether you're a small business or a big business. That will be a major roadblock for you to ever making that transition. So again, I probably need to know a little bit more context, what exactly have been recommended and why, before I can comment on it. Any other questions?
Yes, there's one more.
I am Shamraj Datta from Electro-Steel Castings. I would be asking an uncomfortable question. When you will be forcing everybody to move to S/4HANA from ECC?
Your question was when or why?
No, when?
When?
It's when. Should we call for the break now?
No, it's not an uncomfortable question.
Also, you will be stopping support of the third-party databases. I mean, both are related.
I understand. So just to make it crystal clear, that there is no specific plans right now around forcing you to go to S/4HANA. I don't have a date. I'm not aware of any specific date. The part that I can tell you is, obviously, we are very interested to help you to move to S/4HANA because we believe that gives you more value. We have an interest to move you to S/4HANA because that could give you the access to some of the innovation we will create in the future. So the business value add you get on being on S/4HANA platform is significantly bigger than staying on an older platform. If you, for whatever business reason, want to stay on a previous platform, I'm not sure where you are today, ECC as an example, in whatever version, we are not going to force you to move. There will be one day, like we have had with previous solutions in the past, that we have gone through a transition for such a long time that we believe it's the right time to basically tell our customer, hey, it doesn't pay off for you to stay on a previous platform. I do not have a date when that is, and I'm not aware of any planning around the same. We are going through a massive revolution. Please be reminded, S4 is a redesign of our core. It is not a transformation, a change you make overnight. So far, we don't have any plan to tell you within the next quarter, within the next year. Sorry, we are not going to support whatever version you're on. Please move to S4.
Same with the supporting third-party database also.
Sorry?
I mean, whatever you're telling, it holds true for the supporting third-party databases also.
So it depends on what solution you refer to. What I would like to understand which one, and then we can get our colleagues
say Oracle, DB2, Oracle and DB2.
Sorry?
Oracle and DB2.
Oracle and DB2.
So right now there is no specific plan on not supporting those as well.
No, we have been given impression that probably from 2018 or 19 you will be, you will be not supporting those databases, as a database platform for ECC.
So I hope sincerely that impression which has been created has not been created based on conversation with colleagues from SAP.
Thanks for giving a comfort to us.
Okay.
Thank you. Now we really do have to break, but we do have an SAP booth as well where you will find SAP experts. So specific questions, I think you can take it up with them as well as with Claus. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your attention and a pleasure to be here.